And welcome into another episode of Tiger Territory, part of the Foul Territory Network, a Detroit Tigers podcast. I'm Kieran Steckley. With me, as always, is a man who is currently Rocky Mountain high, but elevation-wise. He is Cody Stavenhagen. How you doing?
Doing all right, Kieran. Only elevation wise, but So sorry for a little bit of an irregular schedule this week. We've been juggling a bunch of different travel plans, and the schedules only get more complicated. We got a rain out Tuesday in Colorado, rather than do the doubleheader Wednesday, where the weather's still a little sketchy. They're going to do it Thursday, so we've kind of got a lot going on. The good thing is I think we have some big picture things to talk about, given how well the Tigers have been playing.
Yeah, so just to get ahead of this a little bit, nothing is official for the Thursday pitching plan. Stands the reason we're going to get Keter Montero again. I just went and looked it up. He last pitched on Friday, so that would make some sense.
Line Keter up pretty well.
Yeah, lines up pretty well there, and obviously it's a guy that the Tigers trust, and you would hope, never get ahead of yourselves, it is baseball, as our boy Austin Jackson will say, but you would hope that you're not really going to rely on some sort of like dominant pitching performance against Colorado, and you can kind of get out of there as scot-free as possible. And I understand as the elevation as we open this podcast, but you get out of there as scot-free as possible. It does kind of set up like it's a crunch for the Tigers. I think that's a good way to put it, because it's the get out day. You're going to play two, and then you got to play a Texas Rangers team that has some pretty stellar pitching performances this year. Hitting wise, they're still trying to figure out pretty much everything outside of Wyatt Langford. You see Evan Carter. You guys get in the nitty gritty of prospects and all that stuff. You see Evan Carter with the Rangers, but like it's not going to be some slouch of a team. So it's not like you go from the Angels and then you go to Colorado. Now you're playing a team that has playoff and beyond aspirations and experience, by the way. So it's going to be kind of like a little bit of an awkward situation there. The good news is that if there is a silver lining to this, is that Skubal will indeed pitch against the Rangers. So you're going to get your ace if you're planning on going to the games this weekend on a homestand. So if there's a silver lining there, it's that Skubal is not going to be as a part of this doubleheader. And just as a really, really brief side note, I'm currently reading a biography on Hank Greenberg, very good book, very interesting story, underrated story, I think, in general. Don't think it gets talked about enough, what he went through. But every other page, it feels like, is like Greenberg did this in a doubleheader. And it's like, they just had doubleheaders all the time.
They had actual scheduled doubleheaders. Yes. Like, didn't have to rain for them to have a doubleheader. But here, you're going to get Skubal Friday and a Skubal bobblehead on Saturday. So the Tigers ticket sales people have to be just thrilled that it's working out this
way. There you go. There you go. Well, I don't know if you know this, Cody, but Skubal has been killing it recently. That might be news to some people, but he's been killing it recently. I just looked this up. He's still like a heavy favorite for the Cy Young at like plus like 220, 250, something like that. Not like great odds or anything like that for the gambling public out there. But he's been doing it without Jake Rogers. So I was kind of thinking, for a rainy day, and I kind of meant it metaphorically. Now we're kind of doing it literally. For a rainy day, I think it'd be nice to kind of talk about one Dylan Dingler. Dylan Dingler is killing it right now. He's killing it. There's a lot of different different stuff we go to, but since we just brought the Skubal part of the conversation in, I'll just go with that. Skubal with Dingler catching. Nito has not caught Skubal. 30 innings, allowed 23 hits, 3 earned runs, 38 strikeouts, and 1 walk. It's pretty good.
Not bad.
It's pretty good. Because the reason I bring it up, because again, Skubal is Skubal, but he'll be the first to tell you how much he had trust in, how much he valued Jake Rogers last season. So like Jake, justifiably so, has been given a lot of credit for how dominant Skubal was in that Cy Young season. But if there's any sort of Rolex situation and Skubal wins back-to-back Cy Youngs, I think there's gonna have to be 2 watches because Dylan Dingler is doing his part. So, there's a lot of numbers, like I said, I can get into, but I think we should maybe start observationally. Observationally, Cody, what have you kinda seen from Dingler this season? And then talking with him, I know we've done the what kind of guy is he, but, like, talking with him and seeing AJ's trust in him and all that stuff, what do you make of Dingler's impact on this team?
Yeah, we've talked about this before, but like how well a catcher calls the game is still such an intangible thing. I've said I'm for all the advancements in baseball, I'm surprised catchers actually still call games. Notice the Marlins are now in the minor leagues, I guess, experimenting with the catchers not calling games, which I know like takes out a certain like human element or tradition or purity. But I'm telling you, we're gonna have like basically pitching coordinators calling plays pitches from the dugout one of these days. Anyway, that was a little bit of a tangent. Dingler seems to just call a really good game. Like he seems to get guys out of hard situations. He seems to call good pitches in difficult counts. He seems to have a knack for how to put away batters. Like you can't really measure what makes one guy different than another. Even like catcher ERA is kind of a flawed stat according to expert sabermetricians out there. But something about that, Dingler just seems to have great feel behind the plate. And off that, he has great poise behind the plate. He always just seems very calm, very in control. You start talking to some of these pitchers about Dylan Dingler. It sounds like his preparation is next level. I mean, I wrote a while back about kind of the notes he takes and how he studies and gets himself to absorb the information. Well, now we're hearing even more about like he's basically running the pregame meetings. Like, all right, Chris Fetter, thanks for your input. I got this. Like it sounds like that's kind of how it goes. And that's a sign of someone who really knows what he's doing, maybe even a level above, some of the guys we're used to. I think this leads. I've got some of the questions like, well, what happens when Jake Rogers get back? It's Dylan Dingler now the starting catcher. And if he continues hitting like 300 with an 800 OPS, that's a discussion. We'll talk about his bat after this here in a second. I think it's still going to be a timeshare, but maybe something closer to like a 50-50 split. I would imagine Jake will catch Skubal just because, And Dingler hasn't really caught Job, I don't think, since Seattle. So I think Jake maybe would catch Job. And then, you divvy it up more probably on who's pitching than anything else. And then you kind of see how it evolves from there. That's what I would expect to happen. But right now, Dingler was a guy entering the season. I didn't know how good I felt about him. Like I liked his talent and he was a good defender. But it was like, all right, can his bat even hold up in the major leagues? Well, so far he's been one of many pleasant surprises and a big reason the Tigers are playing as well as they are.
And we're going to get to some of those stats because whatever you think they're a lot better than you think after a word from our sponsors.
If you want to be bougie and have your own personal shopper, Hungry Root is actually the spot, and you can do it at an affordable price.
Yeah, without a doubt. And especially with my busy schedule with kids on the run all the time, baseball, gymnastics, I need a source that's going to get me going and my kids as well. So I'll pop in an easy chicken parm or grilled chicken, put it in a nice container, get it to go, and the kids are excited, and they're full, and they're nutritional, and it's ready to rock for their games.
There will be snacks that you have never heard of that you will immediately fall in love with. They will pick them out for you if you want. Obviously, you can go on there. You pick all of your preferences. Hungry Root gets the job done. Okay, FT fam, we love Hungry Root. Take advantage of this exclusive offer for a limited time. 40% off your first box plus a free item in every box for life at hungryroot.com/FT. That's code FT. hungryroot.com/FT. Code FT for 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. The code is simple. It's 2 letters, FT.
All right, coming back here, Dylan Dingler. I'm just going to go to his Baseball Savant page, something I recommend everybody do because it's yesterday we talked about, some of the metrics with Javier Baez being a lot of blue with the bat.
A lot of Austin's not here to tell us that doesn't matter this time.
So we can go unvetted there. So with Dingler, I'm telling you, it's a lot of red. It's a lot of positive. Blocks above average, Cody. 98 percentile. Caught stealing above average. 83 percentile. Framing, 98 percentile. And his pop time, if there's like a mediocre aspect to this page right here, his pop time's in the 58 percentile. So for fairness there. But with a 58 percentile pop time, he's still 83 percentile caught stealing above average. You see what I'm saying? So, like, he is playing elite behind the plate. Elite behind the plate. And there were some throws early when he was playing, quote unquote, every day that I was like, ooh, man, like, is this something that could be a problem? And then you just kind of like take a beat, which I think sometimes is good for people that do what we do. And anyone who talks about the Tigers or, baseball in general is just kind of like take a beat and then kind of see what happens after that. And since then, it's been lights out. So like Jake Rogers, like if I would have read that and said Jake Rogers, but like, yeah, okay, that makes some sense. There is literally not much to improve upon when Jake Rogers comes back from his oblique injury in regards to some of these defensive metrics that Dingler's doing. And here's a stat. I went and looked this up. Because we know Dingler was not a full-time catcher at Ohio State. And you talk about the preparation. That's obviously a big part of like how bringing up catchers and why it takes longer for them to develop and all that stuff. And my little joke about how it's kind of unfair what we ask these guys to do because the bat's not that important. But then if you can't hit, then you can't play. So like, so it's kind of an unfair game. Jake Rogers caught 164 games in college. Dylan Dingler caught 62.
That's interesting. That's pretty good.
So, like, what we're looking at is a guy who just by time allotment is not in his prime yet. And obviously he's a very young player. You wouldn't expect him to be in his prime in general. But that's a stark difference. They're both college guys. And high picks, by the way. So I just think like there's still upside to Dingler. And then at the plate, you look at 74 percentile not exit velocity. Exit velocity is a little down, but hard hit 73 percentile, sweet spot 89 percentile. The hitting metrics are off the charts. Remember, I always pointed out that he was an extra base machine in his kind of short frame last season, and that's carried over. He's got 4 home runs, 4 doubles, and a triple. And when he gets a hold of one, it doesn't feel like a fluke. You talk about how like prepared and on it. He looks like behind the plate. He looks like that in the batter's box too. You see what I'm saying? So like there's an argument to be made that he probably is the better catcher right now. I don't know if that's like a shocking thing, but like he is the better overall catcher right now. That doesn't mean he's like better for the Tigers or Jake is replaced or whatever, because Dingler still doesn't have enough at bats to qualify for a lot of batting average, slugging, blah blah blah, because you got to average 3 a game. But at the same time, 128 OPS plus it's not nothing, Cody, as they say.
It'd be even higher, Kieran, if he would take a walk at some point.
Yeah, he has
0
0
94 plate appearances with 0 walks, which is just odd, hard to do. When you look in the metrics, that is the one thing that concerns me. His chase rate is very high, 36.8%. We're talking Javi Baez level chase rates. And then the punch out rate is high. I used to always think Dingler would have a very similar offensive profile to Jake, which is maybe he's not going to hit for a lot of average, but there's going to be some pop and he's going to be able to take his walks. Now, Dingler walked at a 10% clip last year in AAA. Walk rates tend to be a little bit higher in AAA, but he has a track record of drawing walks. For whatever reason, it hasn't happened, and he's hit well enough to make up for it. But you look at 301 average, okay, but only a 309 on base percentage to get to some more of the ceiling offensively. He's going to have to cut down on the chase. And he's probably going to have to cut down on the strikeouts and raise the walks a little bit. That seems like something that should happen in time. It just feels like an anomaly that he hasn't walked at all. But that's something to keep an eye on, because there could be a little bit of a correction. Right now, he has a batting average on balls in play of 393. that's kind of otherworldly high. That's going to come down a little bit. If he keeps driving the ball, if that hard hit rate stays where it's at, he could have a great offensive season. But there's room to maybe expect a little bit of regression, especially if he doesn't begin controlling the strike zone a little bit better.
I'm glad you brought that up because it's kind of funny to see somebody with a 301 average and a 309 on base.
That's Harold Castro territory, baby.
I actually went to a different site to make sure it wasn't some sort of algorithm error or whatever, because it's just like you just don't see that, really. So I'll throw this in there. And now I don't want to underrate what Tomas Nido has shown his ability to do. So I'm including credit to Tomas there. So I don't want that to be misconstrued. But since Rogers got hurt, the Tigers have played 25 games. It's a 16-9 record in that span. The team's ERA, the whole team, the team's ERA is 2.58. And the Mets, who are, because they're New York and the Soto thing, and they were a good team last year, they deserve a lot of the attention. They're getting a lot of attention, especially for their pitching. 3.37 ERA in that span. So with a catching room, no doubt led by Dingler, the Tigers have actually improved. Now, those first couple of games were Dodgers. In Seattle. So it's not it's not like that's a part of it. So it's not like Jake wasn't calling good games or anything. But at the same time, the impact that Dingler has had is clear. There's every metric you want to look at. 0.8 WAR. You laid some of the other stats there. I said the OPS plus. The impact that what Skubal has done. I mean, there's no doubt that all of a sudden the Tigers have two catchers that you feel super comfortable with. I imagine as a coach, I imagine as a player, and definitely as an observer of this team. You have a 1A, an actual 1 and 1A situation, not just one that you just have because AJ likes to split duties. See what I'm saying? So
yeah, for sure. No, I think it's interesting. We're at an interesting point where we can kind of start questioning what's real and what's not. And that's not to say what Dingler's doing isn't real to some degree, but like I said, where can we maybe expect a little bit of regression? I think Dingler is going to be a candidate there. But then the flip side of that, did you know Spencer Torkelson's 5 for 40? It's 5 for 40. Mm-hmm. It's in a slump. Now 3 of those hits have been homers. And then go look at his StatCast page. The metrics are still all red, baby. Even if you break it down in that 5 for 40 spell, his exit velocities are over 90 miles an hour. He's hitting the ball hard. He's just hit into some tough luck. So that's to me, really encouraging to see that Tork's going through it, but doesn't seem to change his process too much. I do think opponents are beginning to alter the way they're pitching him a little bit. That's something I really want to keep an eye on for the next week and see how he handles that. But the metrics are all there for Tork. They have been all season, and even in what's been a little bit of a dry spell, they're right where you want them. Another guy that's interesting to look at is Colt Keith, who got a lot of hate early in the season. He's starting to turn it on, and then you look, he's hitting 190, his expected batting average. So Baseball Savant comes up with that based on exit velocities and launch angles. It's 243. If Colt Keith were hitting 243 and taking walks at the rate he is with the 3 homers he has, I don't think people would be sweating it as much. His exit velocity is still really low. That's always been a little bit of a problem for him, and I think his swing, but we've seen him barrel up some balls recently. He continues to be disciplined and have pretty good at bats. Some of the metrics, like the batted ball metrics, aren't crazy on Keith, but I think there's room to expect him to continue to trend upward as we get into the summer.
Yeah, and we got lost in the sauce a little bit talking with Austin yesterday about some of these big pictures, and especially when he comes out firing. And so I'm just gonna let Austin talk about whatever he wants because that's gold. We don't have to talk about every little player, but credit to Keith for having himself a weekend. and Sweeney raised those numbers a lot on
right
Sunday.
when you're ready to.
So credit to those guys. We didn't forget about them. Torque quietly is like top 6 in games played. Like the guy's like in there like every day. So I don't mean that as like, oh, something could be happening to him. I'm just saying, like, would you think we'd be saying that on May 6th? So yeah, so credit to him, and we've seen a lot of, I would say we've seen a lot of surprises that you feel like have value moving forward, and I'm purposely avoiding the S word, because like my wife asked me a couple days ago, like the torque thing. It's like the average has dipped a lot. I was like, it has, but like don't worry about that. Look at this, look at that, and it's okay. And of course, he hit a home run the day that she mentioned that, and so. So yeah, I just feel like I mentioned this a couple weeks ago, because I almost forgot about the Jake Rogers being like, the starter out aspect of this Tiger story when I was reading Rosenthal's column, and again, that's 100% due to Dylan Dingler and what he's done, and because there's so many good stories about this team, Cody, I think we could safely say, like, the conversation is now officially different in the history of us talking about this team, because they've obviously never had the best record in the American League in May. It just has not existed. We've been doing this since AJ took over. If you look at those lineups, you understand why it didn't exist. So as we move into this new era, and as Austin Jackson is firing on all cylinders about the doubters. You had just done a mailbag in The Athletic, so I was kind of curious what kind of questions if you could tell us what kind of questions were you getting, and did it feel like maybe there was some sort of mentality, to use an old pun, turning of the corner among like what the conversations people wanted to hear from you about?
100%. It was different, probably than any other mailbag or anything like that I've ever done covering the Tigers. I don't think I got a single question about prospects. It's a sign that people are invested in the big league team. Normally it's a lot about like, what is the plan? Who plays X position next year? What is, some sort of criticism of Scott Harris. Like, there was none of that. It was, some lineup questions, a couple things that were a little critical, but it was a lot of like, is this for real? What do you make of this? And then, are the Tigers going to buy at the trade deadline? Which is also not really a question I've encountered much of before. And I think that's good. It's all warranted, right? We know it's a little early for playoff odds, but the playoff odds are up above 80%. The Tigers are playing well, even if they totally cool off, like in a big way, you could see them around 500 and right in the race at the trade deadline. And there would maybe even be more merit to buying in that sort of circumstance than if they just keep rolling and have a big division lead. Not to say they wouldn't buy in that scenario, but hopefully that point gets across. Yeah, it was really different. I think you're starting to both see the optimism of the fans and also see like, no, people are invested when every single lineup decision is getting, dissected a little bit more.
Yeah.
There were a lot of years where Tigers fans weren't that invested in stuff like that. And now there's a little more focus on the day-to-day product at the major league level, which I kind of appreciate. Now we'll see. Like, are these crowds going to be big? The Tigers have been getting more national attention, but are they going to get national respect? In the words of AJ Hinch, like, when's it going to be an achievement, an accomplishment to beat us in the series? When are they going to really be viewed that way a little bit more? That's kind of what I'm waiting to see.
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason to think like Major League Baseball, I think, is looking at the Tigers that way, is how I would phrase it. And then And so like every now and then I kind of go into the opposing media to kind of gauge like that. I'll probably do that this weekend with the Rangers series because some good guys around the team that I respect their baseball minds. I'll have to see, and I'll report any interesting things that I find. But in regards to just like how this team has gotten here, it's been a lot of this in terms of like spikes in production from individual players. So it stands to reason that if this guy comes down to here, this guy will come up here. You see what I'm saying? So like they're being carried by a system and some really fun players. And that's what makes doing this and watching them and the stories that come out of it so fun.
Yeah, I'd said at the end of spring training, like I thought the Tigers would be competitive. I thought they could win, somewhere in that mid 80s range of games. I said I didn't really see a 90 version win of this team. Talking today, it's a lot easier to envision 90 wins, right? Fangraphs is still a little pessimistic. Picks the Tigers to go 66-61 the rest of the way, which would make them an 88-win team. That's obviously based on the Zips projection system that probably isn't giving a lot of love to Javi Baez or Zach McKinstry, despite their hot starts, and also doesn't account for any big roster acquisitions they could make at the trade deadline. So I mean that's a good way to think of it. If you go 66-61 the rest of the way, that's cool enough. That's playing something a lot closer to 500 baseball from here on out. That'd be a 520 winning percentage. You'd still finish with 88 wins, and you'd have a really good shot to win the AL Central. At risk of getting too far ahead of ourselves, doesn't that that's starting to feel like the floor a little bit? I mean, it's baseball, a couple injuries, all this changes, but
Yeah.
Well, the thing to remember,
like I'm kind of a believer in
the thing to remember is that help is on the way, and there is more depth than I personally thought there was from what we've seen this year. And then there's depth that I believe in that we still have yet to see. So yeah, the Scott Harris train, the AJ Hinch train, it's riding high, getting compliments from Joe Madden and all that stuff. Like it's on MLB Network on the interview about it by Costas and all that stuff. So expect more of that. Expect more cameos on MLB Network and hopefully larger crowds and more like intense and meaningful moments for this early in the season. So be a lot of fun to watch. We'll see what happens in Colorado, and then we'll see about this Texas series. Sets up a Boston series that will be quite interesting in a variety of ways. So anything else, Cody, before we jet out of here?
No, I think that covers it for now.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens in Colorado and talk to you guys afterward. You can follow us on Instagram and YouTube and Apple and Spotify. 5-star review, like, subscribe, all that stuff. You guys know how these websites function. We appreciate all the feedback and all the comments and all the likes and subscribes because it helps us grow this podcast into what we think could be a lot of fun and a lot of fun summer. So for Cody Stavenhagen, I'm Kieran Steckley. Everybody have a great day.